Hello ACCA SBL student team, welcome to this topic explainer video on Ansoff's Matrix. Here we'll be talking about what the matrix is and most importantly how it can help you to pass the examination. So keep watching. Right, so before we get into the meat of this video, I just want to clarify something. This is not intended to be a full teaching video, nor is it a question debrief video. The aim of this topic explainer video by the ACCA is to clarify what the framework is or the topic is all about, how it fits into the syllabus, how it integrates with other areas, and most importantly, how it may either come up or be used in the ACCA SBL examination. Okay, if you want to know more about Ansoff's Matrix and related areas to Ansoff's Matrix, then I would direct you to ACCA approved materials, including the materials on the Study Hub. Okay, so I want you to be clear on that as we go through this video. All right, so where does Ansoff's growth vector matrix fit in to the SBL syllabus? Well, to illustrate that, I am on the Chapter 12 Strategic Choices page in the ACCA study material available on the Study Hub. And I would recommend you to go to the Study Hub regularly. Have a look. There's a lot of valuable materials there which you can make use of. Okay, so Chapter 12, Strategic Choices. And here we see a number of different models, marketing mix at the top, sustaining competitive advantage underneath, and highlighted there, Ansoff growth vector matrix. Now, what are these models about? Well, just think about it this way. The aim of producing a strategy or a plan, a long-term plan, is to achieve our objectives. All right, and what is our overall objective? It is sustainability, sustainable competitive advantage, so that we're in existence 5, 10, 20 years from now. But we have to do that in a way which meets the key requirements of our main stakeholders. So it's actually quite a tall order. So to help us to create a strategy, we have a number of frameworks that we can use, and Ansoff's is one of them. It helps us to kind of get into clear in our heads, in our plans, how we're going to implement that strategy and what it means to do that, right? So that's what it means. And finally, what I want to say is that as with all models in SBL, just because we study it in this particular chapter doesn't mean that you can only use it in questions which are relevant to this. You can use it any way you like in your exam answer. You're not going to be explaining any models or frameworks in the exam. You don't get any marks for that. All right? But if you think that a model will help you to structure your answer better, then by all means, use it. All right, so this is what Ansoff's matrix looks like. And as you see, on the horizontal axis, it has products, and on the vertical axis, it has markets. So it's basically using those two criteria to identify the type of strategy that the organization is thinking of implementing. All right. So if you are, for example, taking an existing product into a new market, then we would call that strategy a market development strategy. All right. If you are taking, on the other hand, a new product into a existing market, then we would call it a product development strategy, which is all well and good. But here's the thing. So what? All right. Well, the so what is this, that once we have identified the kind of strategy that we are actually going to be implementing, for example, market penetration, then what we can do is think about, okay, well, with market penetration, what are the things that we want to think about? What are relevant? So we want to sell more of our product in our existing markets. So it's called market penetration. So we need to think about competitive advantage. How, assuming that the market isn't growing, right, it's stagnant, we're going to have to take some market share away from our competitors. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use or try and gain competitive advantage. How are we going to gain competitive advantage? Well, something called Porter's generic strategies, and you should remember what those are. All right, focus, differentiation, and cost leadership. So connected with that market penetration strategy, we will need to think about generic strategies as a way of making them happen. What about existing products into a new market? Well, that's called a market development strategy. And again, there are lots of things that are connected to this kind of strategy. The first is, of course, research. What's a new market like? More brand awareness. Not only how well is our brand known, but how well are our competitors' brands known? How do we find out? We need to think about how we're going to enter that market. For example, is it going to be a joint venture, or are we simply going to employ an agent in that market who knows how things work there? All of these questions need to be answered, planned for, resources allocated, and people made responsible for, okay, in a market development strategy. Let's move now to product development. Well, we're taking a new product and we're selling it to our existing customers. So what are the kinds of things we might think about here? Well, we might want to think about, how are we going to make or introduce this product to our existing customers? We have, of course, brand awareness, brand strength. People know us. We have lots of distribution networks already in place, okay, which is great, all right? But then let's look at our value chain activities. Okay, are any of our value chain activities the same? So if we're making refrigerators now and we want to sell washing machines, then things like the purchase of raw materials, all right, is going to be the same activity. Much of the production is going to be the same. The way that we market or sell our new product is going to be very similar, because similar people will buy both white goods, okay? And once we can integrate those value chain activities for this additional product, then we can increase our volumes, we can exploit economies of scale in those activities. And of course, if we learn something from selling refrigerators, okay, that we can use on washing machines or vice versa, then we can gain synergy for doing this, okay? So those are the kinds of thoughts that we need to think about if we're going for a product development strategy. And finally, a diversification strategy, new product, new market. Now, with diversification strategy, what are the kinds of things we're going to think about? Well, very often companies diversify because they want to diversify business risk, all right? So they are selling, instead of having a hotel in one city, they'll have a restaurant in another city in a different part of the country. That's a very simple example. It's based on a past exam paper. Okay, so they want to diversify business risk, which means that if the hotel industry goes down, hopefully our restaurant industry will go up, and we overall will come out with a net positive cash flow in our business. Or we might diversify simply because we want to exit a market. If you think about the tobacco market, the cigarette market, for example, you'll find that some of the large producers of tobacco, for example, British American Tobacco or Philip Morris, are actually diversifying into all kinds of industries, including, for example, insurance. And the aim is that as the tobacco market becomes smaller, those other markets will become bigger. Okay, so the company is exiting very slowly the tobacco market. Or lots of companies diversify into completely unrelated areas. Why? Well, because they feel that they have the management skills, and a business is a business is a business. And so it doesn't matter what kind of area, what kind of industry sector we're in. Okay, we are simply such good managers that we can manage them. This is called conglomerate diversification. and it is used where, for example, you have a new industry or an industry coming up which is making supernormal profits, all right, and the board of directors says, hey, why don't we invest some money in that industry? Now, conglomerate diversification was very popular at one time, but now it is less popular because overall studies have shown that the returns are lower with this kind of diversification. So that's what Ansoff's matrix is about. Identifies the kind of strategy we're thinking of following, and overall, of course, we are guided by how will this help us to achieve our objectives, our corporate objectives, in a sustainable way, and what will our stakeholders think about it. So, for example, will our stakeholders who are very risk averse not like our market development idea? Okay, they'll say, well, it's a new market, we don't know anything about it, we don't want to go there. So here we see an example of risk being connected to Ansoff's matrix strategy option. All right. Other things that are relevant, which I haven't mentioned, things like change management. All of these strategies are going to require changes to the way in which we operate, the way in which our stakeholders respond to them. All right. But of course, change management is relevant, and as part of our thinking, we will need to incorporate change management in those. Okay, so it's actually really rather complex overall, but Ansoff's matrix is there really to give us some kind of framework, something to say, somewhere to channel our attention going forward. Okay, so now that we're experts on Ansoff's matrix, the question becomes, how do we use it in the examination to maximize our marks? Well, let's have a look at that. We received the pre-seen case study 2 weeks before the real exam. So what do we do with it? Well, we do a thorough analysis of the case study's history, of the context of the industry in which the organization exists, and also we do a thorough analysis of the organization itself, its history, its ambitions, its stakeholders, its circumstances, so its opportunities and threats that exist in its environment. Okay, so that's what we do in the first 2 weeks. Now, this information is given to us in the case study. So here we have the industry information, and then we have the background and other information on the organization in the examination. Okay, so we're now experts going into the exam about all of these areas. What happens in the exam? So we get into the examination and we see that one of the exhibits talks about a proposed entry into overseas markets, right? A proposed entry into overseas markets. Now, that immediately should put us on guard. We're talking about a new market. Now, if we think about Ansoff, of course, it reminds us of either an existing product in a new market, which would be market development, or a new product in a new market, which would be diversification. Okay, so immediately our antennae are up and we think that Ansoff might be useful. Now, when we open that particular exhibit, we're told quite a lot about this proposal to expand into a new country. We're told it's a manufacturing unit, we're told something about the competition, we're told about the economy of that new country. It's a recession, we're told about incentives the government is offering, and we're told about the human resources available, amongst lots of other things. Now, that's all, of course, very useful information, and we need to store it in the back of our minds. Let's now look at the question that relates to this information. You're told that in the home market competition's gone up, right? And so that is a driver for looking for new markets. And this is important because even though competition has increased, demand for the product continues to grow. The company is looking as normal at the future outlook of the company's growth prospects. Now, remember when we were talking about Ansoff, we talked about sustainable growth long term, right? So it just reminds you, so there's another trigger to the use of Ansoff. And you are required to produce a report evaluating the proposal. You're told it should be a critical evaluation, so pros and cons, and benefits and challenges, okay, so of actually accepting the proposal. And then you're asked to make a recommendation. Now, one way of doing it, of course, is in some kind of ad hoc process of saying, well, I think it'd be a good idea because we don't need to compete in our home market, for example. But isn't it much better to use a framework to structure your answer? So how do we do that in this particular case? Okay, so just a quick reminder, we go back to the matrix and we see that in this particular example, they're talking about taking the current product and entering a new market, right? So this is a market development strategy. Now, as soon as we've identified that strategy, all right, then what it allows us to do is to actually focus our thoughts on the benefits and challenges as required in the task. It gives us some structure to our answer, and we may well end up with something like this. Now, this is what the structure of your answer would look like, okay? At the beginning, you would identify this as a market development strategy. You wouldn't explain what that meant because it's not required in SBL. And then you would have a subheading benefits, you'd have a subheading challenges, and you'd go through a list of each of those. Now, in this particular example, there were 16 marks available. If you work on the basis of 2 marks per point made, fully explained point, mind you, then we're talking about a total of 8 points to be made. And here I have come up with 4 benefits and 4 challenges. The point I'm trying to make is that once you've identified the strategy, you can then help you to structure your answer accordingly. All right. And that is the key advantage or benefit of using any framework or model. And please also remember, you will never be required to explain the model. It is there as a tool for your own use. Okay, so that's why you need to know the models. In this particular task, you were required to make some recommendations, and you would at the end, all right, and it doesn't matter what you recommend in SBL, okay, as long as you can justify why you recommend it. So you might recommend a course of action or you might not, but you must say why. You'll still get the same number of marks. And finally, there are some other considerations that you might that might come to mind, and if you have time, you'll talk about them in the examination. If you don't, it doesn't matter. You'll probably already earn the marks you need. But whenever a new strategy or a new course of action is considered, there are things like change management, there are things like ethics, stakeholder responsibility, availability of funding, and so on. Sorry, I beg your pardon, stakeholder response, availability of funding, etc., which you can always talk about, which are always relevant, and which will always therefore earn you marks. Okay, so now that we've spoken about Ansoff's Matrix, a key tool for us to use in strategic choice, I hope it's helpful. I'll leave you with one thought. Please feel free to use this model and any others in any context that you like, where you think it'll help you to plan and structure your answer better. Finally, I'd like to refer you to the ACCA Study Hub, where there's lots of material where you can go through everything that I've said about Ansoff's Matrix and lots of other material as well in this topic. In addition, there are lots and lots of quizzes and practice questions, and I strongly recommend that you have a go at those as well. Good luck with your upcoming exams. Bye from me.